Joker is a very disturbing movie. It's definitely a good movie, but it's hard to watch. And the reason it's so freaky is because of the moral ambiguity of the movie. We feel guilty for sympathizing with the Joker. Watching the movie, it's like why am I rooting for the bad guy? The reason is because it feels like Joker is the victim in this movie instead of the villain. It's kind of like he's the good guy. And so he's justified in his horrible, horrible actions. I know it sounds weird, but let me explain. Part 1, the good guy. At first, Joker isn't Joker, right? In this movie, he's Arthur Fleck. He isn't a supervillain or anything like that. He has a job like a normal person. He has a mom like a normal person. He makes a little kid laugh on the bus with his clown routine. He's a pretty decent guy throughout most of the movie, the beginning part of the movie, let me specify. During the Murray show, who's Robert De Niro's character, Arthur Fleck says, "I love you, Murray," with a childish innocence, you know? And, he says his dad left him, so Arthur takes good care of his mother. He had to be the man of the house. And then he says that he was put here on the world to spread joy and laughter, right? That's what his mom told him. So this movie wants us to see Arthur as a good person. Like, we're supposed to sympathize with him. And we do sympathize with him. Murray on the show even says there's something special about Arthur. So they're setting up that he's like a good guy, right? But deep down, it makes us feel conflicted when the movie does that because we know that in the end he's gonna become the Joker. So it feels weird to sympathize with him. And it makes us sympathize with him by portraying him as a good person in the beginning, but that's not the only way that the movie makes us sympathize with him. He is also the victim, and being the victim makes him justified, strangely, in seeking revenge. Part 2, the victim. In the second scene of the movie, Joker gets beat up by a bunch of kids, even though Joker was just doing his job. Like, they just beat him up for no good reason. It's not his fault, you know what I mean? And this makes him the victim. He makes the little kid laugh on the bus, like I showed earlier, which means he's probably good at being a clown, but then his mom tells him to shut up. Like, the mom of the kid, like, he's making the kid laugh by making faces, and the mom's like, "Will you leave my kid alone?" And it's like, what the hell? Like, he didn't do anything. So Arthur is portrayed to us as a victim, So that just makes us further sympathize with him. He's doing the best that he can to be a good person, right? But even though he tries to be good, like, all these bad things keep happening to him. So even if he acts a little evil or a little crazy, right, we kind of just let it slide later because, like, the world was mean to him first. Like, they started it. So, later in the movie when he starts doing messed up things, like, we just kind of let it slide, which is, that's where the moral ambiguity really starts to take root. And towards the end of the movie, it's revealed that he was beaten over the head as a child by his mom's boyfriend, and that he was malnourished as a child, that they found him handcuffed to the radiator as a child. He may have even been molested as a child by his mom's boyfriend, for all we know, right? And it's like, all these things, like, he didn't do anything to deserve. Like, this happened to him, right? Not because of him, you know what I mean? So the movie tells us that Joker's a victim, right? Like, when his boss lowers his paycheck because the kid stole his sign, right? He has to pay for the sign even though they stole it from him. He's a victim when the government cuts the funding for his mental health therapy and medication. He's a victim on the Murray show when Murray makes fun of Arthur on live television. He's a victim when his mom lies to him and tells him that Thomas Wayne is his dad, but really, Arthur was adopted the whole time. Like, Arthur's mom wasn't even his real mom, and she never told him that he was adopted, So she told him that he's his real son. Like, she lied to him, and he had no idea. He's a victim when he gets beat up by the 3 kids on the train, which is going to lead to my next point. But before I get to that, in the third scene of the movie, when he's talking to his psychiatrist, he says, I just don't want to feel so bad anymore, right? So we know that he's sad, right? And as a decent person, like, we want to, like, reach out, you know? And we want, like, not so much that, right? But as a decent person, like, we don't want someone to feel bad. In this same scene, when he's talking to his psychologist or therapist, rather, in the beginning of the movie, he says, you know, hopefully, you know, my death makes more sense than my life, right? So we find out he's suicidal. And what do you say to someone when they're suicidal? You say, oh, you know, don't do it, you know, like, I care about you, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to get at here. Like, we find out that Arthur is, like, sad boy. So we don't want him to be sad, right? Like, as a decent human being, right? We don't want him to be sad. So all these things make him a victim to us. And as the audience, we sympathize with him. He has a first and last name, right? Arthur Fleck. He's not just like a villain, you know, he's like presented to us as a person. And we don't want him to be unhappy. We wish that things would go well for him, right? Naturally, we're rooting for him. Subconsciously, we don't want him to suffer. We're like rooting for him in a way. But this sympathy that we feel conflicts with what we know is going to happen. Like, we know that he's going to become the Joker, right? And we know that the Joker is this super evil dude. So we are conflicted, right? And that's what makes this movie so hard to watch. It's like you're feeling sad and sorry for this guy who you already know is going to be, like, you know, unforgivably evil, right? So it's just, that's one of the things that makes this movie so hard to watch, right? That conflict that you feel, right, with this character. So that brings me, like I said earlier, I wanted to get to the point of part 3, killing the 3 guys on the train. So this is the turning point of the movie. 3 drunk guys start beating up on Arthur for no good reason, you know, and in self-defense, Arthur shoots them. Now, it's a bit, this part's really complicated, okay? They say the punishment should fit the crime, right? So maybe shooting someone in self-defense is justified. Like, you can't really blame Arthur for it, right? But maybe death is too harsh. Like, this is the part that's controversial, and people talk about how controversial this movie is, the controversy, right? How it's going to inspire people to, like, do killings, right? And I think that it's because of this part of the movie, this turning point, where he kills these 3 guys in self-defense because they're beating him up. But then again, like, do they really deserve to die? You know what I mean? Some people would say yes. And this isn't the first time that Arthur was beat up, so maybe Arthur had PTSD and he just reacted and shot them, and it really wasn't his fault, right? It's such a gray area that this movie, like, presents to us with this moral dilemma. And we, watching the movie, we're forced to, like, come to conclusions in order to continue watching the movie, because this is right in the middle. This isn't at the end of the movie, you know? Like, a lot of times a movie, at the end, it throws this crazy mind-blowing dilemma, right? And then you can go home and think about it. But no, this movie throws the dilemma at you at the middle, right in the middle. So you gotta come to a conclusion quick, because this movie's still moving on to the next scene, you know? The plot's still going, like, we're not done. It's not over yet, dude. You're still on the ride, you know? So you have to cope. So he kills these 3 guys, right? And I'm not gonna say if it was justified or not, right? But let's just go ahead and, like, the first 2 guys, let's say that he had PTSD, okay? And he shot them, and it was self-defense. Okay, but then the 3rd guy, and these were like 3 drunk dudes that are just beating him up, right? So he shoots 2 of them in self-defense, and then the 3rd guy runs away, okay? So this is the part where is the real turning point, right? So he could just let him go, but he decides to chase the 3rd guy down, and he shoots him in the back repeatedly until he dies. He hunts this guy down and shoots him in the back until he dies. Now, this is clearly not self-defense. And it can be argued that, okay, maybe he thought the 3rd guy was going to snitch to the cops, so he had no choice he was still defending himself. But it's hard to argue that it's strictly self-defense. In fact, it seemed as though Arthur enjoyed killing these men. Actually, we know for sure that he enjoyed killing these three guys, right? Because afterward, he starts dancing and he fucks his imaginary girlfriend and he starts doing well in stand-up comedy. Like, it's like the movie's like, oh, when you kill people, good things happen. Like, it's really weird because when he kills these guys, like, all of a sudden things start going very well for him. So that tells me as an audience member that Arthur actually enjoyed killing them, but that is up to interpretation because some people could see it as self-defense, and that's where the moral ambiguity of the movie comes into play because no one's gonna really, at least not yet, nobody has come to a definitive conclusion, right? Like, is he really evil, right? At least at this point of the movie, right? Yeah, it's like the movie saying killing people will make you more confident and it'll get you laid and make you feel good, which is a really fucked up feeling, right, when you think that, right? And so that's why it's hard to watch this movie. Like, this movie is really hard to watch, but it's good though. Like, it just means that the writing was good. When you can make someone feel conflicting emotions at the same time, that's a mark of good writing. And I don't know, man, but it's also a part of what makes the movie disturbing to watch. Anyway, part 4. Justifiable murder. To further mindfuck us, right? The movie portrays the remaining murders because he kills more people in this movie, okay? And to further mindfuck us, the movie portrays the other murders in justifiable ways. First, they set up that Arthur is suicidal, right? By having him tell the joke, knock knock, who's there? Boom, and then he like blows his own brains out. Like, he pretends to shoot himself, right? And he wants to tell this joke when he gets on the Murray show, right? He wants to do it on TV where he's like, he wants everyone to notice him because he feels like nobody cares about him, right? So he wants to get on the show, and then he wants to go knock knock, who's there? And then he wants to shoot himself in the head, and that'll be like his big, way to like big show, his big, hurrah, right? So this tells us that he's mentally ill and unstable. So can he really be blamed for his actions? There's another moral dilemma. There's a lot of moral dilemmas in this movie. So there's another one, the mental instability. So can you really blame him for killing people, right? Anyway, the next murder in the movie is his fat friend. He kills his fat friend because his fat friend gave him the gun that got Arthur fired from his job because they caught him with a gun on the job, and so they fired him. So he blamed his friend for getting fired because his friend's the one that gave him the gun. So maybe that was justifiable, right? He potentially gets 2 cops killed, but he didn't directly kill them himself. The mob of clowns killed these 2 cops. So, it's really not cold-blooded murder because he didn't do it. Like, they were chasing him, and then he like caused, a riot kind of, which ended up getting the cops. They didn't die, but they were like, in critical condition. Maybe they did die, Anyway, after that, he killed, well, actually, before these, he killed his mother, right? But this can be defended because she lied that Thomas Wayne was his dad, and she let her boyfriend beat him up, right? When Arthur was a kid, his mother allowed the boyfriend to beat him up. The boyfriend beat her up too, by the way. So, I mean, she's, also got mental issues. But I'm just saying, right? Maybe the movie presents it in a way that's not straightforward. It's not cut and dry. Like, maybe he felt all this resentment towards his mother that he just exploded and he kills his mother. He suffocates her with a pillow while she's in the hospital. So, it's not cut and dry. That is the ambiguity of the movie, that it's not cut and dry. But yeah, he never goes after anyone just because he like feels like killing, right? I mean, maybe he does. I'll get to that later, right? Maybe he does just feel like killing, and maybe he's just like a crazy guy that just wants to kill people. Maybe. But the way that it's represented is that you can interpret it in a way that maybe there was a reason why he killed these people, right? And not just for no reason. And then, so we're in a gray area now. Arthur was a victim. He's mentally ill. He doesn't really know what he's doing. He was abused as a kid. He never had a father. He's sad. He's just trying to find happiness. Just trying to make others happy. That's what he was trying to do. But what if all along, all this was just a facade? Like, what if there were subtle hints throughout the movie that deep down Arthur was always the Joker since the beginning. Like, what if, all this was just an excuse for him to get away with killing people, That would throw all of our sympathy out the window, wouldn't it? So that gets me to my next part, part 5. Was he evil all along? Now, I think the best evidence of this is in the hospital scene when Arthur picks up his mom's medical records. He tells the receptionist that he fucked up. Verbatim, he says, I fucked up, right? And that he did something horrible, but he doesn't feel bad about it. Now, Arthur's referring to killing 3 guys on the train earlier, and that he doesn't feel bad about killing them. So in this scene, he admits that he does not feel bad about killing these 3 guys on the train, which is pretty evil. Like, even if it was self-defense, like, let's say we were thinking this whole time that it was self-defense, you would still feel bad. Even if you were just defending yourself, you would still feel bad if you had to kill somebody, even if it was self-defense. And he doesn't feel bad at all. So this is a hint as to maybe he's just a really evil guy and he's using like this victim card just to get away with murder, right? Also, in the beginning of the movie, he says, I felt better when I was locked up, right? Because he used to be in a mental hospital, right? And they let him out. So maybe he said this because he knew that he was going to do something bad and that it would be better if he was just locked up so that everybody else would be safe from him, right? So maybe deep down he knew this whole time that he was this like super evil guy, right? And I was watching a review on Red Letter Media, and they had a good theory saying that maybe since they cut the funding to his medicine, that's why he became Joker, because when he was drugged up, right, he was like a good person, and then when he got off the drugs, that released like his murderous side, you know what I mean? So that could also be an interesting one. And lastly, the fact that he blames his fat friend for getting him fired shows that Arthur is kind of selfish. He won't accept responsibility since it was his decision to bring the gun to work. It was his decision, but he blames his friend for giving him the gun instead of blaming himself for bringing the gun to work in the first place. He didn't have to bring it just because you have your gun. Just because your friend gave you a gun doesn't mean you have to bring it with you to work. But he did, but he blames his friend and he does not blame himself. So that tells us that he is a little bit selfish and that maybe he could just be selfishly using mental illness and all this stuff as an excuse, right? So, in conclusion, this movie makes us feel conflicting emotions. And that's what makes it so hard to watch, but that just means that the writing is that good. Like, only good writing could make us feel such different emotions all at the same time. That, emotions that conflict with each other. And Joaquin Phoenix's performance was impeccable. It was mwah. It was so good. But the biggest questions here are, is the Joker evil? Was he justified in going crazy? I feel like most people would say no, right? I would say no, okay? But still, it made us feel uneasy because Arthur started off with good intentions, wanting to make people smile, and he was treated so unfairly for it. People were jerks to him, so he felt like they deserved to die because they weren't sorry for what they did. People would hurt Arthur, and they didn't care that he was hurting. They didn't care about his feelings. They didn't care that he even existed. And because of all that, he felt that the world needed to be punished because the world was the evil one, and the world turned him evil. Maybe, right? And that is one way that you can interpret the movie. And it made it seem like he had no choice, right? Because he was a product of his environment. Like, he had no choice but to turn evil and crazy because the world was evil and crazy. But at the same time, maybe all of that was just him making excuses for himself. So he could just feel good about killing people. So he could feel good about doing bad things. He'd rather blame the world than blame himself, just like he blamed his fat friend for getting him fired instead of blaming himself, right? And, well, and it could even be argued that, like, Batman would have never even come to be if the Joker didn't go crazy and start killing people, right? So maybe all this was necessary, right? Because then Batman would have never lost his parents and turned to justice. You know? So there are so many moral questions and dilemmas in this movie, which I think is good writing. I like it a lot. And now it's time for the bonus part, the smile. And this is for people that, have watched the movie from the beginning to end, right? And of course, spoilers. I'm sorry, right? This whole thing was spoilers. I'll put it in the title, right? I apologize that I didn't say out loud spoilers at the beginning. I'll put it in a font or something. The smile. Okay, that is this bonus part I wanted to talk about. Notice how at the beginning he forces up his smile, right? But then it turns into a frown as soon as he lets it go. Now, this is the first scene of the movie. He's in front of the mirror and he's holding his mouth up. He's holding a smile up with his fingers, his two fingers on the edges of his mouth. He's pulling up and forcing himself to smile. And as soon as he lets go, his fingers leave his mouth, he frowns, which means that he's like forcing himself to be happy, but he's not really happy. He's sad. But then at the end of the movie, when he gets into that car crash and then the mob of clowns save him from the police, and then he's standing above all of them and they're all cheering for him at the end, and then he puts his fingers on his mouth again and he makes himself smile again, just like in the beginning of the movie. He puts his fingers in his mouth to smile, but then he pulls his fingers away from his face, but he's still smiling, right? Which tells us that Arthur is finally happy as the Joker when he was unhappy before. So maybe all of this was good after all. Well, good for him. Not really good for everyone else, though. Well, thanks all for watching, guys. The moral ambiguity of Joker. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe and comment below anything that you caught on the movie, or any thoughts that you had about this review, or any review of your own that you may have, or any criticisms of the movie that you may have. Thanks again, guys, and have yourselves a great rest of your day, week, month, year, and lives. See you guys later. Peace.